Data collection techniques as told by your classmate Valerie Cardenas. Before we can talk about data collection techniques, I want to first define what data is. So data are facts and statistics collected together for reference purposes or for analysis. Data collection is what researchers use to validate their finding in the scientific community and stamp their research as credible or bona fide. It is extremely important to maintain the integrity of data collection, and in doing so, create a detailed plan of how you're going to collect data. Accurate data collection ensures that research questions are answered correctly, that experiments are repeated and validated, that research resources are not destroyed or wasted, that there is no room for misleading, that human subjects are not harmed in any way, and that policies and regulations are not violated. Although in theory, any type of data collection technique can be used with any approach to research, some techniques are widely used with experimental research, while others are used for associational, and still other techniques are reserved for qualitative research. Data collection falls into two categories: qualitative data or descriptive data like interviews and narratives, quantitative data, which is numerical data such as numbers, percentages, and statistics. So today I'm going to discuss 6 data collection techniques, which are interviews, surveys, observations, focus groups, case studies, and documents. Interviews can be conducted in person or over the phone and can be structured or unstructured. Questions asked during an interview should be focused and clear and should promote dialogue with open-ended questions. Interviews are not qualitative in nature. Interviews are more qualitative in nature. An example of an interview would be during the counseling process, the initial intake interview, where counselors can gather vital health and medical information about the client, as well as educational information, family, work, and social life history. The interview allows counselors to gauge the client's level of motivation for coming to rehab and seeking assistance, and specific questions can reveal clients' interests, emotional state, and cognitive or physical disabilities. Surveys are more quantitative in nature, and the responses a researcher gathers from surveys can be assigned numerical values, such as in a Likert scale. Results in questionnaires and surveys are generally easier to analyze, and they can be compared, especially if you have a pre-test and a post-test. So I'll go over in more depth surveys in just a bit. So now we move on to observations, which allow for the study of dynamics of a situation or frequency counts of a specific behavior. Observations are a good source for providing additional information about a group, and if you record the person being observed, it can be used as a form of documentation. This type of data collection can be used in both qualitative and quantitative data, and observational techniques vary in several ways. So they can vary in the naturalness of the setting, such as if you're in a school or a home, these would be considered a natural environment and used more in qualitative research. On the other hand, if you prefer or use a laboratory, which is a bit artificial, but it's where the researcher can have more control over the environment, this is used in quantitative research. So it can also vary based on degree of observer participation. In most cases, the participant knows they are being observed and they usually have agreed to it, but there are situations where the observer is unobtrusive and just watching, say for instance, in a one-sided mirror. And finally, the amount of data varies in observation from a general summary to a moment-to-moment record of types of behaviors. And this can all be done through observation. So now we move to focus groups, which are groups of 6 to 10 individuals participating in a group discussion of questions and answers. Each of the individuals has something in common, and a researcher can gather information at the same time about more than one individual and combine perspectives and opinions on certain matters. So responses are often categorized and analyzed. And an example of a focus group might be a group of parents of children with disabilities who are invited to discuss programs that might benefit and help their children succeed in school. Case studies involve studying a single subject. They examine people in their natural setting, and they use a combination of observation, interviews, and surveys. So it's the most holistic approach to evaluation. And an example of a case study might be shadowing a family while recording and taking notes to study the experience and the issues associated with adjusting after having, say, a traumatic brain injury. Finally, documents and records consist of examining existing data in the form of databases, reports, journals, etc. This can be a good way to gather more information about our research topic and assist in planning data collection techniques by reviewing what has worked in the past or what hasn't worked. And then researchers are able to develop best practice type techniques. An example of reviewing documents and records might be if you're trying to understand why students with disabilities are missing school so often. So you would be able to access records on student absences to get an idea of the frequency that they're missing school. So there are different types of data collection techniques that we can use when we have human participants. As mentioned before, I do want to give you an example of a survey and how it was applied to vocational rehabilitation. So in a survey conducted by Sipperstein, Hyman, and Stokes in 2014, they developed a survey to examine the characteristics and concerns of employed adults with intellectual disabilities. They chose to use a telephone interview, and they called 1,055 parents or guardians of adult children with intellectual disabilities to survey the workers' employment status and history, to observe or to get more information about their adaptive functioning, the presence or absence of behavioral problems, as well as their present living situation. So through the information gathered from the survey, researchers were able to attribute successful employment to early work experience, effective adaptive behavior, positive coping skills, and the availability of natural supports in the workplace, as well as family and social support, availability of transportation, and effective transition programs from school to work. So from this research, Sipperstein, Hyman, and Stokes were able to demonstrate a broad diversity of topics and issues that address key concerns in our consumers that we can redirect attention to and work with participants based on what they feel is a priority. And all of this was gathered through the telephone survey that they gave those parents. So in summary, data collection techniques are used to assess variables in research. Most techniques can be used in both qualitative and quantitative methods, but to different extents. Qualitative researchers perform more open-ended techniques with less structure that may lead to unexpected information, whereas quantitative researchers prefer numerical and statistical structured data. It's important in research that reliable instruments are used to maintain the integrity of the findings so that it is more widely accepted in a scientific community. I hope that I was able to provide some good information regarding data collection techniques so that you can go out and make your own discoveries. Thank you.